Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to Hotline 21 on CAN TV. You're watching a live call-in show, so feel free to dial us with any questions or comments. The number is at the bottom of your screen. It's 312-738-1060. My name is Alice Merrifield, and joining me this evening is Kim McManus. We represent Beacon Therapeutic Diagnostic and Treatment Center. Beacon Therapeutic was founded in 1968 and has been empowering children and families by providing educational, mental health, and social services ever since. I'm delighted to have Kim as our guest on our show this evening. Kim is an LCSW and the director of our homeless outreach programs. She brings a vast knowledge of clinical services and experience to Beacon's vision of empowering program participants in regaining stability and reaching their emotional, economic, and overall growth potential. Before we hear from Kim and the positive impact she's making in our community, I'm going to post some contact information about our organization. Sorry about that. There is our website. It's www.beacon-therapeutic.org. Our motto is empowering lives and changing futures. These are our locations. So the first is our business office on 103rd Street. Our Longwood campus includes our big IOP, intensive outpatient program, little IOP, outpatient clinic, and our elementary day school. The Calumet Park campus has our junior high and high school. And our Western Avenue office has our homeless outreach services, which includes our SOS programs, FACT, CHIPRA, and Early Head Start. Thank you. Now, please join me in listening as Kim McManus talks about how for 42 years Beacon continues with its motto. Again, feel free to call us at 312-738-1060 with any questions or comments. So, Kim, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're the director of our homeless outreach services.
Mm-hmm. And I started with Beacon. It was shortly after I had gone back to school to obtain my school certification. So I'd been a social worker in group homes where I worked with adolescents. I did direct service with the adolescents in the group homes through the child welfare system. Also did clinical management. After I got my school certification, I really wanted a place that focused treatment in the school setting. And when I interviewed at Beacon, I knew that was it. They were very committed to both the mental health needs of the students as well as their academic goals.
Great. So, like you said, you started out in our day school program. What made you first want to come to Beacon? What attracted you to the high school program?
I could tell just from during the interview, there was a good combination between the staff of connection, partnership between the educational and the clinical staff, which I thought was really crucial given that the students in the therapeutic day school, their focus is education, but it's important to obviously address their mental health issues so that they can get to the academic goals.
Great. Can you describe your history since your position at the high school?
I spent 5 years in the high school, which was fantastic. The students are great. It's a great team, great partnership between the educational and clinical staff. After about 4 years there, I switched to clinical manager, where I still did direct service, but was able to also work administratively. And just as recently as April, I transitioned over into our homeless programs, which was nice because when I first started my career in social work about 20 years ago, I started as a children's program coordinator in a homeless shelter for women and children. So it was nice to come back to where I had started.
Okay. What have been some of the positive experiences that you've had at Beacon so far?
I've had a lot. In the day school, every day you had a chance to interact with the kids. Specifically, they had previously had really negative experiences in their previous school settings because their behavior issues are difficult to deal with in a regular school setting. So when they came to us, the foundation of Beacon is respect. We are about relationships. And so given that that's the focus of how we interact with people, our team was able to develop really positive relationships with the students. And that in and of itself is tremendously rewarding. I still hear from some of the students who have moved on and graduated, and that's wonderful. They'll call out of the blue. Now, as I've switched to the homeless programs, I'm administrative. However, some of the really positive experiences are being able to sit in the clinical consultation meetings where our direct staff are talking about their interventions, the progress they're making with the families, And just hearing how effective the interventions are is incredibly rewarding.
And hearing about families and how they're moving on and
Absolutely.
getting stable in their lives, and very appreciative of the housing and services that they've received.
Right. I was able to also, fortunately, go on a museum visit where we were able to take several of our families and children down to the Chicago Children's Museum. So I don't get as much direct service, but I did this past weekend, and it was amazing to watch the interaction, the joy they had, and just the tremendous amount of nurturing that goes on in the families. It was wonderful.
That's great. So last week we had Cynthia Bradley on, who spoke about our shelter outreach services and CHIPRA programs, which is our children's health insurance program. Can you give us a brief overview of those programs and our FACT program also, to refresh viewers' memories and to inform our new viewers?
Sure. Shelter Outreach Services is a team of clinicians and caseworkers who go into approximately 30 shelters within the Chicagoland area. They are providing intensive mental health services, case management to women and children.
And I'm going to put up a picture.
That's one of our staff with a family who had just moved into a home. Our CHIPRA program is our children's insurance program, which is a federally funded program that provides linkage to insurance for children and adolescents in the Chicagoland area.
I'm going to put up some contact information about the CHIPRA program. CHIPRA will help any children without medical insurance or health insurance sign up for coverage through All Kids. Our contact person is Marge Dunn, who's the supervisor of that program, and she can be reached at our Western Avenue location at 773-233-3821. And please let me remind you again that this is a call-in show. The number is 312-738-1060.
Also, we have the FACT program, which is the Family Assertive Community Treatment, which is based on an evidence-based model of ACT. And
I also have a picture, and I believe this is from the recent field trip that you just spoke about of one of our FACT families.
It's an intensive community-based service that's working with young mothers and children under the age of 5, with at least one child under the age of 5. And again, very intensive base services.
Okay. I believe we have a caller. Caller, you can go ahead.
Hi. I was just wondering, what steps would we take if we knew a family who was homeless and needed to get some support services?
Initially, the city has a main directory service, so we begin working with them once they're in the shelters generally. But the city has access through calling 311, or you can go to any police station, Social Security agency, and they'll direct you and get you linked initially with emergency services.
Thank you for answering that, Kim. So you supervise all of our homeless outreach programs that focus primarily on families.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some information on homeless families nationally?
Absolutely. I saw a quote the other day which was really powerful, is not since the Great Depression have so many families been without homes. It's pretty staggering, the population of homeless, and it's only a growing number. Right now, homeless families comprise about roughly 34% of the homeless population, and like I said, and all these figures are considered to be underestimates. Approximately 1.35 million children will experience homelessness over the course of a year. At any given day, there's 200,000 children who are believed to be homeless. 42% of children in homeless families are under the age of 6. So it's not only, families comprise at least 1/3 of the homeless populations, but they're also very young children. And that's not even considering doubled up, which are families who aren't counted through the homeless shelter system, but they're living in really tenuous situations because they've had to move in with a family member. It's not these are not under the best circumstances, and they could be uprooted at any time. So that's a whole other component of the population that is dealing with homelessness.
Okay. Well, I imagine the families have a lot of needs
Absolutely.
for services. So a little bit more about the homeless system. Homeless service system has changed its approach with new initiatives at the federal, state, and city levels over the past years. Can you explain for our viewers what the current shelter and housing system structure looks like?
Sure. It's now it's based on housing first, whereas before there was kind of a concept that you would get all their services in place prior to housing them. However, the belief is that people will best be stabilized once you give them a solid housing option. So housing first is the model, and then wrapping services around them. So as opposed to just the overnight emergency shelter, they're now what's called interim housing, where it can be up to 4 months, sometimes longer if they're in the process of obtaining their benefits. At least it's a little bit more stable, and within that, then you're wrapping services around them. And also once what our program does too is once you're based in the community, we follow up at least for 6 months, because you want to provide those services to maintain stabilization and linkage to community resources as well.
Great. I believe we have another caller.
Hi. What can people do if they would like to support Beacon with in-kind donations on the local level?
Basically, they can contact Peggy Rourke, who works out of our business office. It's 773-298-1243. She accepts our in-kind donations and usually keeps kind of a sense of what we need at any given particular time. People donate things like school supplies and backpacks, school uniforms. It can be sometimes food and grocery gift cards, clothing, household supplies, sheets, towels, beds, anything like that would help any family both get set up in a home, a brand new home, cleaning supplies, but also will help provide for their children. So is there anything you want to add to that? Or
No, those are great suggestions.
Okay. So tell our viewers about the 100,000 Homes for the Homeless campaign that Chicago has recently joined. The campaign's initiated through Common Ground and has been adopted nationally by some cities. How is Chicago participating in the effort, and how is Beacon staff participating?
We joined. It was initially started as a grassroots effort, and that's gone nationwide. And the concept is to get to the most vulnerable populations. So there's what's called a vulnerability index ranking. It's trying to get to finding the most needy based on risk factors such as health, length of homelessness. It's been used throughout several cities. I think it's upwards of about 60 throughout the United States as a voluntary commitment. And Chicago participated. They did a 3-day campaign in August where throughout the city it was based on both singles, where street outreach people would go and complete this questionnaire to try to help determine the most vulnerable. Chicago was different because we did it for the families, which was a completely new part of the initiative. It hadn't been done by other places, so we partnered with Corporation for Supportive Housing, Department of Family Services, several other providers, and Beacon took on the family portion, again in collaboration with several other city entities, private agencies. Because we work.
I believe we have a caller, so let me just break right there and we'll go back to that. Caller?
Yes, I have 2 questions. One, I want to know, I'm a little confused. Do you operate a shelter? And my second question is, where do you get your funding from?
Okay. It's a great question. That's a great question. We actually don't operate a shelter. What we are is a supportive services provider, meaning the shelters, there's such great needs just providing the actual housing itself. So the providers, who provide the building and the food and the day-to-day necessities of the shelter or interim housing, that's a specialty in and of itself. So what we do is go into about 30 of those because we have the mental health background, the knowledge of child development, the needs of families, and we partner with them, and through linkages, we go into their shelters and provide mobile services to them because that's not their specialty, but we can together, we can support the families by going in and providing those services. Your second question is, how is it funded? There's several different funding sources through HUD, Housing and Urban Development. There are grants. There's also money that comes through Chicago Department of Family Support Services. Our FACT program, which is the Family Assertiveness Community Treatment, is a very unique initiative where it's funded through the Hilton Foundation and a collaboration of various partners. So we work really hard and have to be very creative to find different funding sources to fund our programs.
Great. So going back to the 100,000 Homes for the Homeless campaign, So when you went out to do the screenings with the vulnerability index, can you just sort of describe like where Beacon staff were going with those and how many families were they able to assess? And
Sure. And again, Beacon partnered. We took the lead because the 4 shelters that were chosen, the family shelters that were chosen, are shelters that Beacon already provides support services to. So we had a relationship with the shelter providers. The residents of the shelter were more familiar with us, and then we partnered with other volunteers to come in and do the questionnaires. Once that was done, we offered ourselves to be the main service providers of the mental health services. So I believe there were about 103 families in total that were interviewed, and then the index prioritized the top 30. So since August, we've been working with other providers, meeting every 2 weeks. We're providing the primary mental health services. However, then we're doing linkages based on their particular needs of the families and children, linking with local community agencies, whatever is appropriate for that family. And the unique thing about it is no other city that's been part of this campaign has worked with families. So not only have we taken on this initiative, we're also learning what works and what doesn't work, which hopefully will help other cities who want to take on this initiative with families.
great. Okay, and then along with our provision of services to homeless families, how would you explain Beacon's philosophy of care, both harm reduction and trauma-informed care?
Our philosophy of care is very much rooted in individuals are trying to succeed the best they can based on the knowledge that they have, their life experiences. So our services are intended to, first of all, respect the individual and the efforts that they're making. The traumas that they have been through are tremendous. They are humbling to talk to our participants, our families. They've experienced the mothers, the parents have in their own lives extraordinary trauma of abuse and violence, as starting for their own lives as young children. So that impacts their emotional needs growing up, and as they become parents themselves, they're then trying to parent their children the best they can. So trauma informed is understanding that all of our service have to recognize and be very thoughtful about approaching people given their experiences of trauma. Our assessments are keeping that in mind. Harm reduction is setting realistic goals and helping people make decisions that minimize the negative impact of their decisions. It's not setting unrealistic goals. It's working with what's realistic for them. It's been based on substance abuse, where instead of saying entirely you just quit, it's how do you make steps to get there that actually is more realistic for people.
So the goal would not actually be sobriety necessarily in the beginning. It would be how do you manage the substance use in order to minimize the negative impacts on that person's life. So maybe they maintain their job, they maintain their housing, but then you are also still trying to help that person move forward and set new goals as they achieve their goals. Is that correct?
It's a continuum, absolutely. So ultimately, sobriety it could be a goal for an individual, but it's all the steps along there so that they can feel successful along the way, yes, that's much more helpful to some people.
Can you tell me something about how the evidence-based approaches are used in our homeless programs?
Sure. Evidence-based, with limited resources and the importance of being successful with our families, we're constantly trying to look for intervention strategies that have been proven effective so that we know we're doing the best by our families. Two interventions that we're using are fantastic, and we're embracing them. They've been really helpful with our families. PCAN, which is Preventing Child Abuse and Neglect, which was initially created for child care providers in like daycare settings to help them understand the developmental needs of young children. It has since been adapted or used by us to help parents and shelter providers understand, because the basis of that is if people are given the correct tools and understand the developmental needs of their children, they'll be more effective parents. And our parents embrace the teachings of it. It helps them understand temperament, developmental needs of their children. Basically, it kind of puts into children aren't acting out to misbehave, they're acting out to get their needs met, or their behaviors are designated to get their needs met. So it's really empowering the parent through education, parenting strategies, and that's one of our programs that we're using. Child parent psychotherapy is another mental health intervention that identifies the trauma that a child and a parent have experienced together, and it helps them develop a stronger relationship through interaction strategies. For instance, our parents who have experienced trauma themselves, if they had a traumatic experience at the age of 3 or in their relationship with their parent, if they can understand and have a better way to manage it, then they can be a better parent. And they can have a stronger and more healthy relationship with their child. So the child-parent psychotherapy is focused on the bonding and moving through traumatic experiences.
Which fits nicely with the trauma-informed care
Right.
philosophy. Are there other ways that both of these evidence-based treatments sort of go along with Beacon's philosophy of care, in your opinion?
Definitely. We're looking for, when we're working with our parents, our mothers, their greatest motivation, no matter what challenge they're facing, is how they can best parent their child. And so strengthening the relationship with their child and recognizing they know their child best, they know their family situation best, both empower the parent and family to give greater skill to help them become more stable, because the relationship, that family structure, increasing this, solidifying it, is going to help them be more successful in the future.
Okay. Can you give us a few more details about some of the programs in terms of exactly what services Shelter Outreach Services provides, and then also how that program interacts and the FACT program interacts with some of the other programs at Beacon?
Sure. Our shelter outreach services, similar to our family assertive community treatment, start with, when they're working with the families, they do a initial very comprehensive assessment of the family needs. Based on that, part of that is also a benefit assessment of what sort of skills they need to gain, what community resources they need to be linked to, what mainstream benefits, such as, is it getting them to educated in a work program, getting them linked with schooling, getting them linked with maybe if they have disability benefits. They link them with community resources. However, internally, for instance, if someone goes out from the shelter outreach services and within the shelter happens to identify a very young family, internally we can refer to the FACT program, because that happens to be our clinical program that focuses on the young parents with young children. So internally we can refer to FACT. Also, we have an early childhood, early Head Start that has just begun for homeless families, so we can refer to that. We also have a very unique program it's called Big Intensive Outpatient or Little Intensive Outpatient, which it's a intensive outpatient program for children with mental health needs. That, for instance, young children, our Little Intensive Outpatient is a very unique program because a young child who can't be serviced in a preschool because of their traumatic experiences, they're going to respond developmentally with behaviors that in a regular school setting would be considered unacceptable. If they're acting out their trauma or they're biting or they're hitting, that's not something that a regular setting is ready to deal with. However, in a therapeutic setting like our Little Intensive Outpatient, they're going to get the necessary support, guidance, treatment that they need. So we can refer to that. Same as our Big Intensive Outpatient, which is our older school-age adolescent, and as well as our CHIPPR program if we find somebody who needs insurance. So we have a very nice complement of programs, even our day school programs. Many of our kids who need special education programs, because we have our day school program, our clinicians are well versed in the academic needs, the special education needs, the advocacy rights of homeless students. So everybody interacts. We can even do interagency consultations because everybody has a different specialty in the various needs of children and families.
Great. I'm going to post some information. This is the information about our Beacon Therapeutic 18th Annual Holiday Supper. Our annual holiday supper is Friday, December 3rd, so that's a week from this Friday, from 6:30 to 10:30 p.m. at our Longwood campus. For tickets, you can contact Peggy Rourke. Again, her number is 773-298-1243. So please join us for a night of celebration and honoring the homeless families we serve. So why should people support services like Beacon?
Because it's a community issue. The participants that we serve they're no different than we are. They've just had extraordinary life circumstances. providing to them, helping them be successful is going to help our community as a whole. First of all, it's just the right thing to do. They're families
Right.
with needs. These are our children. They're our future. Strengthening the families is going to benefit us all.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Kim.
Thank you.
Next week, please join us at 4:30 again on Tuesday. Our president of our board of directors, Ryan Dargis, will be here with Susan Reyna Guerrero. So thank you so much, and I hope you all have a nice holiday.